Hello. So it is that time of year again where March Madness is right here, right around the corner, and all the brackets are officially out. And so this is my official bracket for the 2022 March Madness tournament. There are a couple storylines that I really like, and I would say the number one storyline that I would want personally for this March Madness is to see Coach K win his last championship. This is his final season for Duke, and so I think it'd be just a fitting end, a last dance kind of scenario where Duke wins it all. And honestly, I would say that's where my heart is and stuff. If I was just going strictly on just what I would want to see happen, that would be it. Even though the odds are that it's probably not going to happen. But I can see them as a lock for going to the Final Four. Storyline number 2, I would say, is probably Gonzaga getting revenge for, I believe this is Drew Timmy's last year. They, last year, only had one tough team that they played, and it was UCLA in the Final Four. UCLA almost snuck out with the win, but then there was the buzzer beater. And then when they showed up to the national championship versus Baylor, they just got run off the floor. The third storyline that I have written down here is there's a stat somewhere out there, I don't know if it's 100% true, that when Villanova wins the Big East title, they go on to win the national championship. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it happened in 2016 because in 2017 they didn't win it and they got bounced early by Wisconsin. And then in 2018 they won it again, beating Michigan in the national championship in 2018. And so those correspond and stuff with Coach Jay Wright. And so I could be wrong. Do not fact check that. That could be way wrong. Then this isn't really a storyline, but I really do think genuinely, no matter which bracket it is, there will be an ACC or a Big East team that wins it all this year. 10 out of 13, championships have had a 1 seed or a 2 seed. And then, out of those 10 championships, 8 of them had a Big East team or an ACC team, or they had both competing against each other. So there's just a lot of interesting facts if you look at it that way. Now I want to talk about some of the dark horses that I think could make a run and seriously compete for the title. The Wisconsins, the UConns, the surprisingly Virginia Tech. And I only say Virginia Tech because they're from the ACC. So if you go back to that statistic rule that I was talking about where an ACC team will represent with a Big East team or something, Virginia Tech is an ACC team. Watch for Virginia Tech. Personally, I don't. I have them losing to I believe it's UCLA on that side. The last one is Murray State, just strictly because they've won a lot of games. Okay, let's talk about upsets now. One of my favorite upsets, and I want to give them credit, but just because of history of them being in the tournament at such a high seed, they've always underperformed. Arizona versus Seton Hall. Another upset to watch and to look at is Michigan and Tennessee, respectively, if they do meet up. This isn't college football, SEC versus Big Ten, where the SEC is dominant. The level playing ground is pretty even, and so I would say Michigan could beat the SEC champs, Tennessee. This is my first upset, if we're going chronologically from 64 to 32 to 16-8. And then my first upset would be Indiana versus St. Mary's, shocking everybody in the first round. And then sadly, all these St. Mary's fans are like, well, there goes my bracket. Loyola Chicago versus Villanova. It's one of those things where there's 7 seconds left in the game and they got to go the full length of the court, and someone puts up a prayer right outside the 3, and boom. Villanova loses, Loyola Chicago moves on, and they dance some more. If Loyola Chicago beat Villanova, that is how I would see it, is how Loyola Chicago has won so many other college basketball games in the tournament. Buzzer beaters, or a really late layup or something, or fumbling the ball out of bounds, just something really tedious. So my drought enders, teams that I think could end their drought. Number 1, Gonzaga. Number 2, Sparty. Number 3, they have the most national championships, UCLA. Wisconsin, Virginia Tech, I talked about them being the dark horse of the ACC. Illinois. Okay, let's get into regional play, and let's talk about the bracket on the west side. When Michigan State plays Duke in the round of 32. Like, I want to say that Duke will have it by landslide, but then again, you never know. If they do meet up in the Sweet 16, Gonzaga versus UConn. For the West regional final, I have Gonzaga versus Duke and stuff. I'm at a toss-up because I'm really convinced that Coach K can get to a Final Four, not necessarily win in the Final Four to get to the national championship, let alone win the national championship. I do think he can have a Final Four appearance. So out of Gonzaga and Duke, I have Duke moving on to the Final Four. Let's move to the East. Virginia Tech, I believe, can beat Purdue and Texas. I think Virginia Tech will lose to Kentucky and stuff, and Kentucky will be the one that stops their Cinderella run. I think UCLA is also on a little bit of a redemption tour after losing at the buzzer last year. And so just because of things that I've heard while watching Selection Sunday and doing a little bit of research, Baylor has some injuries, and I'm one that does believe in the Super Bowl hangover, and so I don't see them going back to back. Baylor, if they can survive North Carolina in the round of 32, I have Baylor versus UCLA, and so then it will be UCLA versus Kentucky for the chance to represent the East. I think Kentucky can return to the Final Four after a couple years of not being in it. In the South and in the Midwest, I have a couple crazy things happening. I do have Seton Hall upsetting Arizona in classic fashion. I do think that a couple 1 and 2 seeds will underperform. I have Michigan upsetting Colorado State. I have Tennessee beating Longwood, but then I also have Michigan beating Tennessee. I have Villanova and Loyola playing a tight game, but Villanova moves on. In the Elite Eight matchup for the South Regional Championship, I have Seton Hall versus Villanova. I have Villanova representing the South. Out of the Midwest, will be represented by Kansas. In the Sweet 16 in the Midwest, I have Wisconsin versus Auburn, and this is where this bracket kind of gets a little more crazy, is I have Wisconsin beating Auburn, even though Auburn was the number 1 team, or they were in the top 3 the whole year, and they had such a dominant year. I do believe that Wisconsin can upset Auburn. Wisconsin's my team, then I have them going on a little bit of a run. I have Wisconsin meeting Kansas in the Elite Eight for the regional final. I have Kansas winning. I would say my Final Four is Duke, Kentucky, Villanova, and Kansas. And then whichever teams are in the final would be so fun to watch. Everybody does Duke versus Villanova every year, and it never – or Duke – North Carolina, Villanova, North Carolina, Michigan State not Michigan State, Gonzaga versus Villanova, Gonzaga versus Duke. Like it never happens. Like those ideal matchups, they never happen. Off of this Final Four, I would say Kentucky versus Villanova, but I don't. You never know. Because it's March. You never know who would win. But out of Villanova and Kentucky, I'd probably lean towards Villanova. If I would go just strictly on like my favorite teams, like colleges that I really like and basketball teams that I've really liked in the past. Out of the West, I'd have Notre Dame or Duke. Out of the East, I would have North Carolina as the 8th seed. Out of the South, I would have Michigan. The Midwest, I'd have Wisconsin. If you pull it back and you look at the bigger picture of like the field of 68 and like all the teams that are actually there, including the first four up into the last thing, I'd say the title favorites: Duke, Gonzaga, Villanova, Kansas, or Kentucky. One of those five. I could be wrong. I could have just spat out like total BS for like the last 10 minutes. But then with those, like, oh, here are 5 teams. Like, one of these 5 is going to win it. And I end up being correct. Who knows? Like, I'm inaccurate on all these picks. You know, it's March Madness. Buzzer beaters are bound to happen. So, you know, we'll just see and stuff. And I'll try to keep it, you know, round to round and just, like, see what happens. Like, I hope it's a really good tournament and stuff. I thought last year's tournament was fun. I think 2017's tournament, from what I can remember, recent memory, like 2017 and 2018's tournament, they were just so fun to watch. Like, I'd watch them during school, or I'd get off work and just watch it. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Who knows? All right, peace out.